I thought my city builder was getting close. I had been working on visuals, systems, upgrades, progression, and all the normal stuff you tell yourself matters when a game is almost there. And then I had a playtest. And about just 20 minutes in, the person got basically bored. And that was not fun to hear. But honestly, that moment might have actually saved the game in the long run. Because what they exposed was not just a balance issue, a UI issue, or some missing polish. It was that the actual core loop of the game had a ceiling, and once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. So in this video I want to break down what the playtest exposed, why it mattered so much, and how it forced me to redesign the game instead of just decorating a weaker version of it. I thought I was mostly dealing with the normal mid-project problems, the kind of things that are very real but also very tempting because they feel solvable. Things like balancing numbers, making the UI feel cleaner, improving the visuals, tweaking some upgrades, or making the Steam page and trailer materials feel stronger. And to be clear, those things do matter. They're not fake work in any way, but they were not the thing holding the game back most. The dangerous part is that those problems are visible. They're easy to point at, they're easy to turn into a task list, and if you're making videos about your game, they are also much easier to show. You can say, look, I improved this effect. Or look, I redesigned this menu. Or look, I added this new system. It feels like progress, but a lot of the time, visible progress can hide a deeper design problem. And that is exactly what was happening here. The key feedback was not some huge dramatic rant. It was a lot more simpler than that. The game just got boring, and I saw that myself. And more specifically, once the player understood the main synergy idea and expansion, there was not enough left to figure out. And that sentence hit really hard, because if the main loop becomes predictable too quickly, then it does not really matter how nice the menus are, or how polished the building effects look, or how smooth the camera feels. Player has already mentally solved the game. And once that happens, the rest becomes execution without any sort of curiosity. And for most games, you need curiosity. That was the moment where I realized I was not dealing with a game that needed more polish. I was instead dealing with a game that needed an actual more interesting structure. A real fun and engaging core loop. At first, it is tempting to hear feedback like that and think, okay, I just need more content, or I just need more upgrades, or I just need more buildings. These are all things that I was thinking right in this moment. But I do not think that was the real answer. The problem wasn't a lack of stuff or content, it was the lack of evolving tension in the core gameplay loop. The game had some interesting pieces, but they were not creating enough long-term discovery. The player could understand the synergy idea, use it, and then start drifting to something else. There's not enough pressure, not enough constraint, and not enough reason to keep rethinking the city. And in a builder game, that is dangerous. Because if the player stops making meaningful decisions, then the game turns into maintenance. You're still clicking, you're still placing things, but you're not really engaged anymore. That is a much deeper problem than this upgrade is too cheap or this animation needs to work. So instead of just adjusting a few numbers, I started rethinking what the game should actually be pushing the player toward. One of the biggest changes was land expansion. Before, land was more of a side thing. It was useful, yes, but not really the central challenge. Because after playing for 30 minutes, you had infinite money to buy basically any land you ever wanted. After that rework, that changed. By reducing the starting space and making expansion requirements matter more, the land itself became valuable. Now space was just not there in the background you spent some money on, it became part of the puzzle in the actual city. And that changed the feeling of the game a lot. Instead of just growing because you can, you're now making deliberate decisions about what deserves space and what helps you unlock the next chunk of the city. That was a huge shift I didn't really expect. I also started connecting systems more tightly. If synergies are the heart of the game, then the rest of the game needs to support that. The previous version did not do that, because it was basically just a slight boost to buildings that you already had, with no real upside or downside to think about them too much, because you already had so much money from the passive income. So to make the synergies matter, the progression needs to point back to it. The upgrades need to relate to it, and the expansion system needs to make those choices interesting. That was one of the most important lessons from this whole process. If one feature is driving the game, the other systems cannot feel separate from it. they need to orbit it. Otherwise, players ignore them, misunderstand them, or treat them like a side noise. So after that redesign, after making most of these changes already, I had another really useful playtest. This time with a known gamer. Previously, I had only tested my game on gamers that kind of knew this game, and maybe that is the right approach or not. But playtesting with a known gamer exposed a different problem. The new direction was better, but it was still not obvious enough. They didn't actually understand what to do. Things that felt completely clear to me were not clear at all to someone coming in fresh. The navigation was unclear, the synergies were still hard to read, and the progression cues were too subtle, which are all small things that I didn't notice. And that taught me something else that matters a lot in game design. A system can be genuinely better and still fail if the player cannot understand it. So the next stage became not just make the game deeper, but make the depth readable. That meant better prompts, clear UI, stronger visual cues, better synergy previews, and more intentional feedback. So the first playtest killed the old loop, and the next playtest helped me shape how I actually teach and communicate to players how that new loop works. This whole thing also changed how I think about making videos around the project. The previous weekly series I did for 11 weeks on this game really helped me in the beginning. It gave me accountability, momentum, and even helped me revive the spark I had for the game. But later on, it started doing something more dangerous. It started nudging me toward tasks that were easier to show instead of tasks that were most important to solve. And that is really a subtle trap I didn't really notice. Because if you're always thinking, what can I show this week? You can start selecting for visible progress instead of high leverage progress. And those are usually completely different things. Sometimes the most important work is deleting or reworking a system, sitting and thinking for 2 hours on the design, or maybe rebalancing something invisible that could change the entire feeling of the game, or doing what I did, doing a playtest that just makes you feel bad. That stuff is harder to package into a weekly update that you record kind of live while working. So I decided to stop forcing this game into a weekly format, because the game needed to stop bending around the content schedule. From now on, I would much rather make videos when something real happens. When there is an actual turning point, an actual lesson to teach, or an real design change that changed how I think about the game. Good playtesting is straight up assumption breaking. The best feedback is often not the most polite feedback. It is the feedback that exposes the thing you were unconsciously avoiding. In this case, boredom was the signal. There was not really much rage or a big form of confusion or even a crash, but just boredom. And boredom is easy to underestimate because it sounds soft and not really that important. But for a game, especially a city builder, boredom is brutal. It means the player has stopped caring about the next decision. So now what I've learned is to trust that kind of feedback a lot more. Now, if someone gets bored when playtesting my game, I ask, what assumption about the game that I had just broke? Because that question is way more useful to find problems that maybe you couldn't see yourself. So that is where Block by Block Tycoon is right now. It is still in a messy place, it is still being figured out, but I think it's in a way healthier place than it was before. Because the game is now being shaped by clearer problems. A playtester got bored after 20 minutes. And that really sucked to hear. But it forced me to stop pretending the issue was something on the surface. And because of that, the game is better than it was that morning. And honestly, right now, that is enough. I hope you made progress on your game, and I will see you in the next video.